Welcome to the Book Tribe podcast, a channel dedicated to discussing how authors can take their writing, publishing, and marketing practices to the next level. And today we're talking about starting an authoring business. And to help me navigate this topic is Kat Caldwell, writer, podcaster, and creative coach. Welcome, Kat.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you. And I'm really excited for today's discussion. But before we get into it,
Yes.
we just have some quick fire bookish questions to get us started. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Awesome. So what is your writing or reading guilty pleasure?
Oh my gosh. So I'm a really eclectic reader. I typically pull books from anywhere, but at the moment, I'm really into sort of vigilante justice books, like thrillers.
Fair enough. That's quite niche, but I like
Yes.
it. And are you, when you read, team paperback, team ebook, or team audiobook, which technically is listening, but we'll discount that.
Yeah. At the moment, team paperback. I love to hold a paperback. But I always have an audiobook on backup.
It's really useful for like
Yes.
when I'm going around the house and cleaning and I want to read, but I can't physically read. So
Exactly.
yeah, no, I get that. And lastly, what is your favorite genre to write in and what draws you to it?
Oh gosh. To write in, I'm an eclectic genre writer too, so um I really love writing my historical romances, but I can't help but also really love speculative fiction, and that is something that I'm playing around with to possibly bring a pen name out. So I really like it. I haven't yet fine-tuned it enough to bring it out. I have a standalone. Anyway, so that's what I'm liking now. I like my focus is really low on my Clifton strength, so I'm constantly playing around with new things. I do have to say I really like writing in deep third person, so my characters are very close to the reader. You're very much inside their point of view, so that is across the genres that I write in.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you for sharing. And so now we're going to get into kind of the discussion topic today. But what is it that you're so passionate about when it comes to helping other authors? You know, why is it that you do it?
It's wonderful that Kindle has come out, and that the floodgates have sort of opened. We are no longer subjected to all the hundreds of thousands of query letters if you don't want to do that, which I love. I'm an indie author. I have my own publishing business, and I think that's exceptional because, quite frankly, I work in the other. I'm a book coach, so I help people find agents as well. And just so that everyone knows, it doesn't always mean that your writing's bad when you get rejected. That has a lot to do and more to do with market, what's happening, maybe even that own agent's life. So what I really love is that we can do this. But for me, my focus a lot of times is on the craft of story. That can go into the craft of writing if you want it to, but first and foremost, I think that you have to know how to tell a story the way that humans consume story. And there is a specific way that we are addicted to story, right? Some stories fall flat and some do not. You can then from there go into genre, but more than anything, just because you have an idea in your head or a plot point or a character does not mean that you have the full storyline. And so that is like what I'm most passionate about helping people fine tune that idea, and understand that to create a story, there's sometimes a little bit more than that has to go into it.
Yeah, and I really like that kind of there's a distinction or a difference between writing and storytelling, and
Right.
I think that's not something I've heard yet, which is actually it makes sense already to me.
Yeah.
The craft of storytelling. And what are would you say some of the biggest kind of pitfalls that authors fall into in the creating a story process?
Oh, I think that really depends on your point of view of writing. So I am an early 80s kid, and so my worldview of writing a lot of times was um, people who had to very much write in a literary way. And this is something that I think people my age or older sort of have to break down sometimes. Um, because of course, back then, before Amazon, only certain people got the contracts, right? A lot of people broke out by writing short stories in magazines. So a lot of science fiction, that's sort of how they did it. Um, but otherwise, you really had you had like this almost higher esteem of who this writer was, and you tended to focus more on what your sentence structure is, and like making everything very beautiful, and then not really knowing where the story was going to come from. And I think nowadays when I'm working with, so you have to sort of break that down. You have to understand um, how to develop the character more, how to develop the story, that stories are more fast paced than perhaps what you read when you were younger. And so those books really do influence you as much as maybe you don't think so. Like it's 60 years ago, it's 50 years ago, but the things that we read growing up will influence you, and times have changed. Readers have changed, likes have changed. For younger readers, it is creating really 3D characters. Like a lot of times they will get hooked on a trope or a certain thing, and they will, as my 13-year-old say, make it their whole personality. And it can work if you're writing in a kind of certain niche genre. But again, that goes back to like the story. Okay, what does this have to do with the actual story? Does it have to be their whole personality? Things still have to work out. A lot of times also plot, especially when I'm working with fantasy writers, the plot is the whole personality of the book. And in the end, people will put down a book, even if it has a great plot, if they can't connect with the characters, right? So there's kind of these two different groups that I so far have seen. It all comes back down to story, but it's like a different point of view, really, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, your point about reading habits and the kind of the different reader types that exist now in the market means that, the way in which they consume stories. I'm for example, I'm a reader who I go through books one a day
Mm,
because I like the fast pace, almost that kind
yep,
of adrenaline rush of I know what I'm getting, and then I'm just going to keep
yep,
reading and reading over and over. But then there are other times when I like a good classic, so it's really
yes,
all over the place.
yes, yes. And you have to know that as a writer too, right? You have to I always talk on my podcast about making decisions on purpose as a writer, because it's a really subjective industry. Like taste will change. We were talking before, like fantasy has really taken over. Brandon Sanderson has done a phenomenal job of leaving his publishing house and going independent. And just tastes have changed because of that, and what reader expectations have changed. Gold foiled hardbacks, like that was a thing of the past. I have like beautiful hardbacks that I spent a lot on, but they're like classics, and now it's come back as this really big thing. And so it will change quickly. It is also subjective to how the readers are acting. If you're a writer, you just need to, you can't be in your cave, really. You have to know, and it's hard you have to see those different dynamics, things that are changing, and then make your decisions on purpose, what you're going to write, how you're going to write, and it will impact who buys it.
Yeah, and so new authors then, who perhaps are feeling a little overwhelmed
Mm.
by this writing process or storytelling process, what advice do you have on kind of the journey on which they go on, and creating a sustainable kind of routine or pattern or structure that works for them?
I mean, if I were to do it again, and what what I always ask my authors is, what are their plans as a writer? I think that there are a couple different ways that you can go. You can be a writer, and I've worked with writers who are like, I just want to finish these books, and if they ever get published, that is fine. And that is one route to go. And so that is probably the writer that can focus the most on story and craft, and fine tuning. They run the risk of fine tuning to their grave, in editing. And if that makes them happy, if that's what they want, that's fine. I have other authors who just want to write one book, and they're going to focus mostly on the finding an agent. And so what we would still have to look at with them is how quickly they write it. So we work a lot on story, and understanding that they will just probably have to spend about 1.5 years querying. Again, because markets change, because the agent is doing so many different things, and it has really nothing to do with their writing. And then there are those these are typically indie writers who really want to make a career or a business, I would say, more than career, because I think we're all career, but more of a business. You're going to have to look and make some harder decisions, whether you're going to write to market, write to trends, how quickly you can write, how quickly you can understand storytelling, and then make decisions from there on your expectations of getting to that point of success that you have put before your that you have in your head, right? Because we all have a different definition, I guess, for success and where it's going to go. And most everyone I know has had to push that in some place, because it will start in one place and it will move to another. But yeah, I sort of work with 3 different ideas, I guess, with aspiring authors. And I do think that it matters. You will have less frustration if you understand those sort of different paths and the way that things are moving in the market. But you can look at the market and you can learn about being an author while you're learning storytelling. So storytelling is innate within you. A lot of times it's your logical side of the brain that gets in the way. Or you're like, if you're highly educated in the sense, like you really like things like psychology, maybe you have your PhD, you've done a lot of writing that's not fiction. Maybe you're just on your Clifton strengths, you're a really high learner, high input, where you are constantly consuming, maybe, I hate to say, like higher end things. Maybe you read popular mechanics or things like that. You might have to find a way to shut off that sort of that logical, that sort of getting in the way of fairy tale, because in the end it's fiction that you're trying to write. Things are going to have to be mashed up. I was working with a writer just last year where it's kind of based on something that she witnessed in life, and I said, okay, that's, it can still be that story, but unless you're going to write a memoir, it has to, like a book, everything has to keep going. You can't have that moment where they're walking into the kitchen. You have to probably mash things that happen together, closer together, or put them all in one place, just because story-wise, it's not going to work. You just can't have all this time in between. So you can learn that, and it all makes sense when you see it, right? You just have to sort of make sure that your brain really understands it. And then you can be learning about the market as well as you're doing that, and then just start writing.
Yeah, no, so what I'm kind of hearing is, like, it really depends on what the goal is, and then kind of
100%.
being almost realistic in setting those timelines and expectations and milestones for yourself,
Yes.
and then kind of just going on that journey. But in terms of resources or tools that they can use in that kind of creative process, are there any things that you might recommend to them?
I mean, these days there's a lot of resources. I personally, what am I going to recommend? Because um, the Science of Storytelling is an incredible book if you're really into why it matters that your story is set up a certain way. But not everyone's going to want to read like craft books. So the fact is, like, you can read, even if you don't plan to be a plotter. If you're a discovery writer, some people call them pantsers, which I just find is a terrible, having lived in Ireland for a year, I'm like, you can't be called pantsers. we will be calling us discovery writers. It's not a bad idea to read Save the Cat or all the other plotting books, because what they're trying to tell you is how a story works. You have certain scenes that have to be put in every single one of them. You have to understand that the climax, a lot of times people want to put it at the end. It's not the end. It's about 75 to 80% there. I'm reaching for a book, just a second. So one book that I would recommend, I love the Science of Storytelling, but some people have come back to me and are like, this is too much. The one that I would tell that people to read is Lisa Crone's Story Genius.
Right.
So if you guys, that's where I would start. This is easier to read. It's easier to understand how to create your character, what you should actually know as a writer. Whether or not it goes into the story, she will tell you, but that's where I would start. There are amazing people out there. There's lots of courses out there. But I would start with Lisa Crone.
Great stuff. And when it comes to kind of the next step, so moving just past the writing process now, what are the kind of crucial steps? Well, I suppose it's not quite after the creative process, but what other crucial things should authors be doing to prepare their manuscript for that publication phase?
Oh, golly. So are you talking about, I think that again depends on what path you're going, although kind of, so if you're talking about business, I always recommend that they learn business and marketing. And Erica, you probably know much more about marketing than the average person who wants to sit down and write. I mean, it helps when people have sort of a background or they've worked in it before. But what I have found since 2017, when I, bit the bullet and went my own route and said, I'm going to be an author, whether or not anyone else wants me to be. I tell people, we all want to just write, but the market's so inundated that they won't find your book unless you know how to market. And it's devastating to hear that, and no one wants to. I don't even want to hear myself say it. Like that's because it's really not what we want to do. You should have a place where people can find you. You should have a place where you can share your journey and talk about your writing. I also know that that's very difficult to do when you are first starting out, and like imposter syndrome is a real thing and it feels really weird to do it. There are some personalities that do it really well, and we all know those because they're the people on Instagram that just kill it because they'll start another, and they'll kill it again. You're just like, I don't understand what's going on. And then the rest of the personalities are just like, I'm writing a book. So I do understand that it's difficult. But it can be done. You can learn it. You will probably be a tiny bit slower. You can share your writing even if it's not finished, and that is also a difficult thing to hear. There are some really great platforms out there that you can do this on. I think readers are a lot more forgiving than writers are on themselves. so as far as like while the manuscript is almost finished or whatever, so business wise, you've got to start building the business. You have to start, and you have to, let's say you're going the route like indie author, I want this to be a career, I want this to be my job. self-sustaining, right? It's a business at that point. It is a small business, and you're going to have to figure out what you're going to put into it. And you should really, really, really treat it like a business from the moment. Like, that is one mistake I would go back and fix if I could. Budget, resources, what you're going to put into this as a small business, and taking it seriously. As far as like manuscripts in the writing goes, I would constantly be, well, not constantly because you have to write, but I would be brushing up on craft and your genre, whatever that is, and making sure that you have the right character tropes. Going back, learning how to self-edit is important, because you're not going to pay for several renditions of an editing. Like, an editor reads it once, gives you feedback, you return feedback, and if you're lucky, they'll give you a second round of feedback. So if you're a new author, understand that if you want more rounds than that, you will pay more. So self-editing is very, very important, and learning to self-edit without getting in the trenches of never leaving your manuscript and only going back. Like, you can get in this vortex of never getting it better. It's very important to learn how to self-edit, and that could be learning critique groups, that could be taking a class, that could be reading self-editing books. So it really, that then also depends on your personality.
Yeah, it comes down to, as you say, the end goal and the personality and what the author is comfortable with themselves.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this kind of business aspect then, because we kind of said, marketing is important, and setting a budget is important. But what would you say are the key pillars to kind of the business side of authoring? Like, what would you say are the 3 or 5 things that authors absolutely need to understand or to have in place to kind of have this set up as a business?
And I told you before, Erica, that I do things a little bit differently than a lot of my friends. So, again, kind of goes along with what you're willing to do. I'm willing to put myself out there and fail and learn from it. And some authors are not, some people are not. And, not that I don't have a small mini crisis each time that happens. Don't get me wrong. I am not like always super happy that I fail. But I think that it's an amazing time to have a small business that's creative. There's a lot of visual marketing right now, which you can still participate in, especially with video. It used to be a little harder, where you're just like taking a picture of your manuscript and it was kind of lame. But with Reels and TikTok, you can do all these different things and play around with what you say in the captions, and you can do the same video over and over again. Nobody cares, and you're just changing the words around, right? So for me personally, the pillars would be to try the new things that are out there. Just because it worked for so-and-so, let's say, that you've been following on Instagram for 3 years, and now that you're coming out with a book, it's not working. Yeah, because this industry changes so rapidly. I don't think that you can just repeat what other people do, personally. I'm sure somebody can prove me wrong on that one. But I think that you should keep an open mind. You should learn to keep an open mind and open eyes. You should attend conferences and masterminds in which you are like the lowest person on the, sort of author rung, let's say. You're the newbie. You're the one there to learn. This industry has some of the kindest people and some of the most willing to help you out people that I've ever seen. Just come with questions and no attitude. that which is difficult, right? Because this is a very personal thing that we're putting out there. These are words that we're writing that they feel very much our own, our babies. And that is something that I think I believe you learn to do the more you put yourself out there. It's kind of like getting reviews. Like the first few reviews, you're like, no, that's not how it is. You shouldn't say this, right? But you just, it's not that you get callous to it. I think you learn to understand the sort of the business person, like the business cat and the writer cat, and just sort of wear different hats. I do think another pillar is to understand what marketing it is and what you're capable of doing yourself. I don't have the greatest graphic eye. I can sort of put stuff out there on social media. If it's going to be commercial and be on my product, I have to learn to budget to pay someone. There's just no way around that. I can't do it. And so you just be honest with yourself. What are you able to do that's good or not? I don't know how many people will claim that they can make their own book cover. And yes, there are lots of things out there, Canva, whatever, that help you do that. The truth is, you can tell a DIY book cover when you're scrolling through Amazon. And a lot of times, we all know we're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but we do. So just budget for it, learn and be honest with yourself. I think, yeah, honesty, learning the business end of it. And of course, you always want to be better, always get a little bit better as a writer. I do, at least. I don't know, maybe other people don't. I think they do. But yeah, keeping an open mind, learning from others, understanding that things are not going to be the same as they were 3 years ago. I don't know. Is that enough?
Absolutely. Because I guess my next question then is going to be, what do you think is holding a lot of authors back from that? Because I suppose, they go, oh, well, I just want to write books and I want to publish them, which is fine. But, is there something that's holding people back from the business side?
Yeah, it's scary. We have no idea. It's scary. We're writers. We want to just write. And I understand that. That's how I feel so many times. I mean, so many people told me that I shouldn't do a Kickstarter for my contemporary fiction. And I went ahead and did it. And to be fair, like, it's a lot of work. And at this point, I don't know when the podcast will go out. It'll probably be done at that point. It's a learning process, and I'm not sure that I will make the end goal. And so I could live my life never trying. I refuse to think that it's impossible. So I think that I can revamp it. I can I can find out why my readers told me that they want one thing and then they didn't follow through. We'll see what happens. I still have 2 weeks. But yeah, it's scary. It's scary to try something and be like, oh, that didn't work. It didn't work how I liked or how I wanted. You got to put yourself out there. There's a lot of judgment on writers. If you like, Goodreads used to be a great platform, and anyone who's listening from Goodreads, they can take this advice. It has become a really negative platform, a very harshly critical platform. And I don't know why. I think maybe some of the Bookstagram things, like I see some people on social media who review books who are very mean. And so it is scary. It's scary to do this and to put yourself out there and to be judged. Because when you think of it, I'm like, man, Taylor Swift has some really terrible songs. Sorry, Swifties. And then she has some really great songs. But she puts out tons of content. And she's just like, move on, let's go, let's do something else. If you've spent 3 years on a book and somebody on TikTok says, this is the worst book I ever read, but half the time it's because they don't like the name of the character, that can ruin your business. I mean, it's mean. So it is scary. On the other hand, not to leave everyone with a terrible note, you can't change that. So what I would do is, like, you just have to focus on what you can do. Do baby steps. Again, this industry, people are super nice. reach out, ask questions, start smaller. Don't, of course, go to like Brandon Sanderson and ask him to promote your book. Like, he probably gets that. But find friends, find other writer friends who write in your genre, swap out, be kind. I mean, golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated. And I think it will come back to you. But if you're not someone to do, just jump in and try something and completely fall flat on your face, as I will do, baby steps, try little things. You can go, you can start a small newsletter. Lots of people are Substack. You can go to reamstories.com. You can put out little things. You can find those readers. You can go slower, and that's okay. But yeah, you don't have to deny the fact that it's scary, I think. But you could find the little ways in which you can just get stronger and stronger and build up your confidence more and more. And then you're going to be able to take bigger steps, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And actually by day, my job is actually in marketing. So there are a lot of things that you've been saying that completely hit the nail on the head. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is fail fast and learn quick. And
there you go.
it's about, trying things. And if they fail, then try something different, or just see what went wrong and redo it.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of things are coming out of this. So let's just talk about the coaching piece then, because you're also a coach. How is this a valuable tool for authors?
Coachy. So there's a couple different ways that people coach. It's funny because on Threads, which is becoming like the new X, and such a waste of time. I do not recommend anyone wasting their time on all this. Somebody was like, stop thinking you need a coach. You don't need a coach. Like, oh, that's funny. You don't necessarily need a coach. A coach is basically what an editor used to be. What is it? The Artful Edit is a book, if anyone's interested in Fitzgerald and his journey. Basically, his editor was his coach. He would send chapters off to his editor. His editor would give him feedback right in the margins, tell him to add in the green lamp all over the place, tell him to make, what's his name in The Great Gatsby, always say kid. He's his coach. Editors are no longer like that. And so I think a coach really depends on the kind of writer. And then you need to find the coach that works for you. If you want an agent and you've never written fiction before, you should either take a lot of classes or you should get a coach who is specialized in the genre that you want to write. It is expensive, but putting a book out there is expensive, even if you go the indie author route, which I could break it down for you if you want to have a heart attack. It's kind of like doing your wedding, whether you get a wedding planner or you do it yourself. If you sat back and like actually went through the budget, you might save a little bit of money, right? A couple thousands, it's not nothing. It's saving money. But what a coach could do for you is get you there faster, give you accountability, give you feedback in the moment. They will also have probably connections in the industry. And they can help you figure out your query, your synopsis, and getting that agent. So if that is the route that you want to take, I would suggest a lot of people either do an MFA. Many books that come out and hit that debut author, they did it through an MFA. They wrote it while studying their MFA. Many, many, many writers did that. In the United States, that's incredibly expensive. So, and there are some really great programs in even smaller universities that aren't super expensive, but it's still going to be thousands of dollars. If you don't want to do that, coach is your next best, which is going to be faster. If you don't want to do a coach, if you have to just money-wise do it piece by piece, it might take you longer unless you're just innately incredibly talented. But there are lots of courses out there and lots of books out there that you can learn if you are able to learn everything and output it the same way that you learn. If you are that sort of learner, you could do that as well. But yeah, a coach is especially for anyone who wants to be more literary, who wants that agent, who wants to do it faster. That's what they're good for.
And so how does it work with you? How do those sessions work? Because they're one-to-one, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do one-to-one, and I do very select. In the end, a lot of coaches do become select just because I give monthly workshops. I either have a guest come in or I teach a monthly workshop. So if people are on my list, they get that and they can sort of choose the topic that they want to be. And that is a group session. One-on-one, mostly they become a little more select as a coach, because what you want is a writer that's ready to write. So once I find a writer ready to write, they will send me pages. I will go through them. In the beginning, we will go through the pages, and then we will talk about where the story needs to go. Like, so a lot of times when you have a first draft scene, it is just the author trying to figure out how to get what's in their head onto paper. A lot of times there is movement missing from it. So like, where is this person? Who is this person? Why are they here? A lot of times it doesn't work as a scene because the scene has certain rules to it. You have to have a change in the scene. The character has to change a decision, an emotion. Something has to move in order for it to be there. We'll talk about like, okay, so if this is going to happen with this character, then you had told me about this happening down the road. So how is this going to tie into that? It has to do with a lot with brainstorming and going back and, okay, so if you're going to do this, then because the emotion is not here, so now we're going to move this emotion into he's going to be angry, or unwillingly obey, let's say, like have this, instead of just obey, let's unwillingly obey, and be very reluctant to do this. Okay, well then that changes last week's chapter and we have to go back and we have to do this. So it's looking a lot at their writing in that moment. If they are just starting out, it is constantly kind of replotting. And so one of mine that she was writing based off of something that she had experienced, we were constantly going through and developing the characters. Okay, so if that's going to happen, so why do we care about this character? Why do they need to do that? What are they going to do by the end of it? So if they need to change and be this way by the end of it, they need to start out much different. So what is that difference, and how does that look on the page, and how are they going to act? I mean, these are all things that technically, this is taught everywhere. Their character arc, characters have to change. They have to have a goal. They have to have motivation and conflict. But it's easier to hear that than it is to do it. And so a lot of times it will just be much quicker to have somebody rapid fire questions. Okay, then how is that going to work? And then they have to come back and they say, okay, now I figured it out. This is how it's going to work. This is how they're going to react to their mother, because we can't just have this stagnant relationship, right? We have to have some movement here. Otherwise, the reader will put the book down, right? So like, if nothing's moving, if nothing's changing. And so the one-on-one is a lot of questions, talking it through, probably like a therapy session for your characters.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
So if there's someone out there that is thinking, oh, okay, so maybe, I'm at that stage of potentially needing a book coach, how do they kind of go about selecting who they work with?
Yeah, most coaches will have probably a questionnaire form. I mean, one of the best like one-stop resources would be Author Accelerator, and I am not in their list, but that is who I got certified through. Fictionary also does certification, and there's another one, but anyway, I'll see if I can remember. The Fictionary, Author Accelerator, they usually have within their system people that they have certified, and you can go there. Many coaches will have like a half an hour talk or some sort of questionnaire in which they will personally respond to what you are doing. Number one, looking for the genre. What are they interested in working with? Probably everyone's going to be a bit bound by price. And so people who are, the more known they are, the higher the price will be, of course. But there's nothing wrong with working with people with a little less experience. They'd probably be very, very eager to work with you. Doesn't mean that they don't know enough to help you, quite honestly. They just don't have the name. It's like, buying a Marc Jacobs bag compared to just whatever other bag. But I would go first with genre, what they're interested in, then get up the courage to just go to that call. Many coaches know that most people will not sign up right there. So that is what it's there for. If they have that sign up, they want to talk to you. They want to hear from you. They don't want to get in a relationship with you that isn't going to work any more than you do. See if they teach classes, see if they've talked on a podcast, and see if you can see yourself working with them. Many people also run mastermind classes or workshops just because in between coaching, or because they're a glutton for work. I don't know. Most of us are. We're like overachievers. They have usually Substacks. Go and read what they're saying. How do you connect with them? And then, and then probably ask, like, what does our contract look like, and what are your rules for if this isn't working out? Like, how do I protect myself, and how do you protect yourself? And don't be afraid of asking those questions, because remember, like, you might feel like you really need this person, but it's a business. Like, at that point, put on your business hat and say, like, I have X amount of dollars to invest in me learning how to write this book. Why are you the person that I should invest that money in? Right. And I think that that's the chip that a lot of times is hard to switch, because we're kind of like, I just really want this to come together. But that would be what I would say to my younger self. Like, put on the business hat and say, okay, now we're going to talk face to face. How are we doing this? How do we protect each other and ourselves? Because then you're going to have a really great, respectful relationship, knowing and understanding what the other one expects, right?
Yeah, great stuff. There's some really, I think, insightful things for authors to be, new authors and people at that point to be thinking about. Now, thank you again for answering all of the other questions there are today as well. But just before we finish, if there was one piece of advice that you could give new authors, whether it's about that creative process or the business piece or the coaching, what is one piece you'd like them to leave with today?
I would really like new writers to really trust their gut on the story and to write. Turn off the critical part. You're probably a reader. I would say 99.9% are readers. Story. Sit down, write it out. And I always tell my writers, no words are ever wasted. I have probably erased as many words as I have published, if not more. I would say more. It's all about you understanding the story deeper. And so to sit down, trust yourself, to start writing, just keep writing, and never stop learning. But you got to write. Nobody can read the things that you haven't written.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And for anyone who wants to learn more about you or get in touch with you, where do they go?
You can go to catcaldwell.com. The podcast is Pencils and Lipstick. It's pretty much everywhere. The easiest thing to get to know my voice and to understand how I see the business and writing is to get on my newsletter, which you can do at catcaldwell.com.
Awesome stuff. Thank you again, Kat, for today. I think we've had some really great things come out of this conversation, and I've certainly learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.